The screen is visible. Hello?
Yes, it's coming.
Thank you.
It's visible.
So first of all, good afternoon, judges and fellow members. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving this opportunity. My friend Shubhadeep Sinha and I are representing from Institute of Science, PHU, and are here to present the topic quantum cryptography. Now Shubhadeep will continue with the slides.
Thank you, Manishka. So today we are going to discuss about the following topics, as you can see on the screen. Now let us first try to understand what is cryptography. Cryptography is the method by which secret messages are delivered from between two or more parties, without and which is protected from the eavesdroppers through means of set of algorithms and security keys. It has been used since ancient times, and in ancient times ad hoc tools were used. Modern cryptography is heavily based on mathematics. Modern crypto system depends on the secrecy of the keys used for encryption and decryption processes, while the algorithm used is a public knowledge. All modern crypto systems relies on the assumption that certain mathematical problems cannot be solved efficiently or in practice are computationally infeasible. Now let us see about quantum cryptography. Scientists are researching about quantum cryptography for quite some time to create very sophisticated security systems. Quantum cryptography merges the two aspects of science, that is quantum physics and cryptography. It uses the methods of quantum mechanics encoded with quantum computing to create a very complex cryptographic system. Now, before that, we have to explain the qubits. Now, the fundamental unit of quantum computer is qubit. Qubit can take any two of the states, either gate 0 or gate 1, unlike our personal computers, which can only take a 0 and 1. The difference is that qubit can take a 0 and 1 and can represent both as a superposition, like alpha gate 0 plus beta gate 1. Where alpha and beta are complex numbers and they are the probabilities of the amplitude. As you can see on the diagram over here, the Bloch sphere is used to demonstrate a quantum bit. Now the question arises how a qubit is generated. It is generated from a light source by allowing a photon to pass through a light filter, which fixes the polarization angle of a photon. Usually, we take 0 degree and 90 degree polarized lights to create a qubit. And in the diagram, you can see that the creation of a qubit, how it is created. Another important thing is that the superpositions of gate 0 and gate 1 in the qubits, we cannot measure them, because as we try to measure them, it collapses, the wave function collapses, and decoherence in the superposition is found. It is due to the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, because the wave function which is used by the photon to dictate the 0 and 1 state collapses as we try to measure it. Now coming to the no cloning theorem, which was proposed by W.K. Wouters and W.H. Zurek in 1982, states that it is impossible to create a perfect copy of the quantum state of a particle, because the qubits are made from photons, and as eavesdropper tries to interfere with the qubits, the orientation of the qubits changes, and it is detected that a eavesdropper is present in the network. Now to demonstrate this, a derivation has been proved over here. So due to the time constraint, I'm not going through all of the derivation, but I would encourage the audience to go through the slides. Now I would ask my friend Manishka to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Shubhadeep. So Before moving to quantum key distribution, we will talk about what is key. So key is a piece of information, usually a string of numbers or characters, which is used to encrypt or decrypt the message. Key is only known to sender and receiver. And a key distribution is the process of exchanging the key between the sender and a receiver. So with quantum effects, we can distribute the keys secretly, and hence we can say that quantum key distribution is unconditionally secure means of establishing secret keys, which results in a perfect crypto system. So here, this is a representation of quantum cryptographic. This is a representation of quantum cryptographic communication system. Here, Alice and Bob are sender and receiver respectively, whereas Eve is an eavesdropper. As you can see, there are two channels. First is quantum channel and second is public channel. So public channel does not have to be confidential, but it must be protected from an eavesdropper. Quantum key distribution prevents from eavesdropping because if an eavesdropper uses the wrong polarization basis to measure the channel, then the result of the measurement will be random. Now let's talk about quantum key distribution protocols. So basically, a protocol is a set of rules which governs the exchange of message over a channel. There are various of security protocols for quantum key distribution. Some are here, that's BB84, B92, entanglement-based quantum key distribution, example E91. So here we will only discuss BB84. So BB84 was the first quantum key distribution protocol which was proposed by Charles H. Bennett and Chris Bresat in 1984. And this protocol make use of two channels for communication between sender and receiver. The first is a quantum channel and second is a classical channel. And classical channel needs to be authentic. And this protocol make users of 4 quantum states with 2 different bases. First is a rectilinear basis and the second is diagonal base. So here you can see that of course Alice will send the key, and for that it will generate some random bits. These bits will be encoded according to some random basis and then sent to Bob, that is the receiver. So Bob will receive the photon and decode it on some random basis. So after basis matching, as you can see that Bob has decoded some of the bits correctly. So after on classical channel, it will be discussed and shifted key will be generated. And then a security test will be performed and it will discard. And then some of the bits will be discarded. And then after that, final key is generated. So this is the procedure of BB84 protocol. In this section, some of the quantum key distribution protocols is tabulated. It is seen that the protocols which uses Heisenberg's uncertainty principle are just a variant of BB84. And BB84 has been proven to be unconditionally secure. Similarly, B92 protocol and E91 protocol is also proven to be secure. So now let's talk about the attacks which an Eve can perform. So it can be grouped into 3 classes. The first is coherent attack, second collective attacks, and third is individual attacks. So in coherent attack, Eve interacts with and measure all the qubits collectively, whereas in collective attack, Eve interacts with all qubits collectively but measure them individually. And in individual attack, Eve interacts and measure qubits independently, not collectively. And the various type of attack that Eve can perform are man-in-the-middle attack, that is represented by MITM, intercept and recent attack, IRA, side channel attack, denial of service attack, represented as DOS, and photon number splitting attack, that is PNS, and Trojan horse attack. Now Shubhadeep will move to conclusion.
So before we conclude, let's see about some things about QKD. QKD over optical fiber links quickly becomes inefficient because it is very slow. To overcome this problem, researcher is being focused on free space QKD. However, it comes with its own problem as it needs ideal conditions. Although there has been great efforts to improve the QKD, it is only being used by some government organizations and research institutes till now. In 2020, DRDO tested their own QKD setup, and ISRO has very recently used quantum key encrypted signals for video conferencing. So, thank you. The slides end here.
Thank you, Manishka and Shubhadip. So, Manishka and Shubhadip, I want to ask one or two questions to you based on this. First of all, you are talking about the cryptography, and in cryptography, you are supposed to create the random numbers at certain stages. So, what kind of algorithm you used for creating the random numbers? Are you creating, firstly, are you creating the uniform random numbers or some random numbers corresponding to some distribution function?
The numbers are generated, the keys which is being made is generated randomly.
But what's the underlying distribution? Uniform distribution?
No, sir, there is no uniform distribution. It is just a random.
But whenever you choose a random number, any distribution, the random number will be coming from some distribution.
Yes.
So you must be having any information about the distribution. Okay. So now from quantum mechanics, can you tell me a little bit about the Bell's inequality, because one of your algorithms is based on the Bell's inequality. What do you understand from Bell's inequality?
Bell's theorem states that don't know, sir.
Just about the hidden variables. What do you understand from hidden variables?
Hidden variables. The Bell's theorem uses hidden variables because it generates the numbers from the variables randomly from one state to two states.
Okay. And uncertainty principle. What does uncertainty principle?
The uncertainty principle, because here we are using photons to generate the qubits, and we know that photons can be treated as quantum particles, and quantum particles governed by the Heisenberg's principle. Because if we try to measure a quantum particle, we cannot measure it because it is so small. The energy which we require to measure it changes the quantum state of the particle.
Okay. So, but what does Heisenberg principle states?
The Heisenberg principle states that we cannot exactly measure the qubit.
Sure.
Because if we try to measure, the qubit collapses and it becomes the wave function collapses.
Qubit energy at a given time, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Manishka and Shubhadip, so you are transferring information from one place to another. So what kind of channel is used in quantum cryptography for doing so?
Ma'am, two channels are used. First, a quantum channel where the photons will be transferred, and then to generate the shifted key and the security test, they use public channel, which is confidential, and that is it should be free from an eavesdropper.
No, I mean you are transferring photons, no?
Yeah.
So how that transfer is taking place? What type of channel is used to transfer photons?
Quantum channel.
Quantum channel. So how is it different from optical fiber? Means how is it better from? You can use optical fiber also, but you are saying that optical fiber is not very useful in terms of.
It's not very efficient.
It's not very efficient. So, in what terms quantum channel is efficient over this optical fiber? Just in terms of efficiency or something else?
In optical fiber, the data transfer is slow, but in quantum channels, till now, in ISRO, the experiment which was conducted, it was between two buildings, and it used free space basically, and the photons was being transferred.
All right. One more thing, how is the security test performed?
The security test, when if any eavesdropper is trying to interfere with the network, he or she is trying to interfere with the photons, and the photons.
So, ma'am, basically, security test is performed. For example, if an eavesdropper is present in the channel, so after generating the shifted key, Alice will just pick out some bits and produce an XOR and get the result of XOR of them, and then Alice will only tell the position of those bits to Bob, and then when Bob will perform an XOR, and of course, if it matches correctly, then Bob will also get the XOR of that. And if an eavesdropper is present and he knows some of the information, but he does, for example, he know first bit and not the second bit. So this security test will reduce the chances of eavesdropping.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So my question is, like you talked about in quantum mechanics, we can have superposition of states, right? Like alpha times 0 state plus beta times some other state, say 1. Okay. So like, have you heard of something? Have you heard of the Schrodinger's cat problem?
Yes.
Can you tell me in
I'm sorry, what was the question again? Schrodinger's?
Schrodinger's cat equation, cat problems of Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger's cat, yes. It is also based upon superposition, because a cat is placed inside a box with a poison, and there is a 50-50 chance that the cat is being alive and dead, because we cannot see the cat. Now, if we open it, we can see that if the cat is either alive or dead, but not in a superposition of both. So this concept is used in the superpositions of qubits, because yes, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi. So my question is, as you say, our capacitor channel must be free from eavesdropping. So suppose if it is not free from eavesdropping, then can we still do quantum key distribution?
Yes, we can do. For that, security test is performed. So it reduces the chances of eavesdropping to 0.
If our capacitor channel have eavesdropping, then what is the effect of it?
If the classical channel is,
Eavesdropping.
yeah.
So, then what is the effect on our system on it?
What? Pardon? Can you please repeat the question?
What is the effect in our system? Is it make any difference?
Classical system is talking.
Yeah, it of course will make a difference, because of course eavesdropper will get some information about the shifted keys. So for that, to prevent that, security test is performed.
Okay. And you also mentioned about the photon are transferring from the quantum medium. So before transferring photon, we have to generate those photons and detect those photons. So how we can generate those photons?
Those photons are generated by a light source, and they are polarized, so that in a certain angle, it's either 0 degree or 90 degree or 45 and 135, which is based on rectilinear basis and diagonal basis.
But in quantum cryptography, we generate single or double photon. If we generate photon by some ISO, then we have millions and millions of photons. So how can we generate single photon? And how we detect the single photon? That's my question.
I do not know.
Okay, fine.
Hello everyone. So the next team presenting would be Ayush Bakchi, Stute Barua and Malar Das Gupta from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. They would be presenting on the topic, could epigenetics be the key to psychopathological unsolved mysteries? So please, you can start your presentations now.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I'm Stuti Barwa, along with my friend Ayush Bakshi, here to talk about our topic, could epigenetics be the key to psychopathology's unsolved mysteries? So before we go into our topic, I would like to start with two of America's greatest serial killers. So the first one that you see is Ted Bundy. So he was known as Theodore Robert Cowell. So, in his adulthood, he was a very charismatic personality, and, he was a women charmer, very famous among the women. And, his peers always described him as empathetic and kind. And later, but however, if you look into his life history, you can see that he was an illegitimate child, and hence he was bullied because of his unknown paternity. And since he was born out of wedlock, he was raised as his grandparents' child. So, later when he was, taken in as a suspect of the various murders that was happening, he confessed to the killing of 30 women whom he kidnapped, raped, and murdered. And, he came under the guise of with a broken arm and, asking for help. And later he was executed in the month of January in the year 1989. Next you see is Tom Odell. So Tom Odell was Thomas V. Odell. So he was just 18 when he killed his parents and his 3 siblings. So later what happened is when he was arrested and, he was put into a death row sentence, but his sentence changed into a life sentence. So he went through this, introspection and self-reflection, and he contacted Dr. Robert Hanlon, who was a neuropsychiatrist. And Dr. Robert Hanlon helped him come up with therapy. And, he discovered that he was from an abusive relationship with his parents. His mother was abusive. And that's the reason, that must have been the underlying reason for him connecting the murder. And now he has a book along with the psychiatrist. So if you see both of these two individuals, the serial killers, you can see that both of them came from abusive families. So, this raises a very important question about can environment influence genes that alter emotions or personalities? And that's how we come to epigenetics. So epigenetics is the phenomena where there is changes introduced in the genome without direct alteration in the DNA sequence of the organism. So, this is basically involves the inactivation and activation of various genes. And, most of these genes are, these epigenetic marks are reversible and stable. And some can be inherited, which is in debate if they can be inherited or they can't be. So when we talk epigenetics in terms of relation, in terms of behavior, we come across this term called behavioral epigenetics, which is defined as the application of the principles of epigenetics to the study of physiology, genetic, environmental, and developmental mechanisms of humans. So what you see here in this picture is you see 2 neurons. Neurons are the fundamental units of the nervous system and the brain. And these neurons have something called as synapses. So these synapses transmit chemicals known as neurotransmitters between them. So these neurotransmitters are a form of communication between these 2 neurons, which give instructions to, to do a particular mental process or a cognitive function. And there are many different neurotransmitters involved, like serotonin, oxytocin, and monoamine oxidase A. So these, when there are epigenetic marks, involved in these neurotransmitters, they basically affect receptors. Receptors are proteinaceous structures which help in the facilitation of these neurotransmitters. So when they are affected, there is a dysregulation of these chemicals. So when there's a dysregulation of these chemicals, that can give rise to different behaviors such as excessive aggression, or you have antisocial disorders, and you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So now I have Ayush describing on how these epigenetic marks are involved. Over to Ayush.
Thank you, Stuti. So now I'll talk about the 3 major pathways that seem to be involved in aggression at the molecular level. So the first one is the serotonin pathway, and the protein or gene of our interest is serotonin transporter solute carrier family 6 member 4, or SLC6A4, as you can see on the screen. So basically, the brain serotonin concentration is regulated by this protein because it controls the reuptake of the serotonin in the synaptic cleft. Moreover, hyperfunctioning of serotonin neurotransmitter has been linked to the higher risk of aggressive behaviors. And this is consistently be seen in psychopaths. For example, the childhood stress or bullying, victimization, or abusive relationships can lead to epigenetic changes between the ages of 5 to 10. Now, why I say epigenetic changes? Because silencing of this gene, which is another epigenetic change due to DNA methylation by early stresses, can lead to the decrease in levels of serotonin in our central nervous system or in our cerebrospinal fluid. Now, as you can see in this graph, the reduction in serotonin is positively correlated with irritability, which again leads to aggressive behavior. So the second pathway I'd like to talk about is the oxytocin pathway. Now, oxytocin is a neurotransmitter, which is a hypothalamic hormone, also known as the social neuropeptide, because it regulates complex social behaviors by promoting attachment and facilitating social interactions. Now, impairment of this oxytocinergic system has been observed in rodents, has been linked with aggressive behavior in rodents. Now, why we normally use experimental models like rodents instead of humans before we go on to human trials. So, again, in this case, childhood maltreatments, emotional abuses have been linked to lower levels of oxytocin in the cerebrospinal fluid of the central nervous system. Now, the protein or gene of our interest in this case was oxytocin receptor, or OXTR. Now, OXTR is present on the postsynaptic cells, so they are responsible for reacting to the oxytocin once they cross the synaptic cleft. So, if there's DNA methylation of this gene, there will be no production of this protein, and hence there will be low amounts of oxytocin receptors in our system. Hence, oxytocin, we won't be receptive to oxytocin. Hence, as you can see in this graph, with decrease in oxytocin receptivity, the duration of aggression increases, which is again characteristic for psychopaths. Now, the last pathway I'd like to talk about is the dopamine pathway. And the two proteins of our interest are catechol O-methyltransferase and monoamine oxidase enzyme, which have two forms, A and B. So dopamine is a part of the neural reward system. It's also a neurotransmitter, which includes behavioral activation, motivated behavior, and reward processing. Now, what these two enzymes do, they basically sequester dopamine in the synaptic cleft, as in it limits the concentration, it keeps it in check. But if there is, again, epigenetic silencing due to DNA methylation or histone modification or RNA silencing, their expression levels in our cell will decrease, these proteins will be expressed, and as well, dopamine will increase. So, to check this, the body converts this dopamine to noradrenaline by the DBH hormone, DBH enzyme, dopamine bihydroxylase. Now, noradrenaline is associated with flight or fight response, again, which can lead to aggression, which is seen in mice. And as you can see in this diagram, in this figure, that impulsive antisocial behavior is again positively correlated with the increase in dopamine in this case, which is seen in psychopaths. Now, coming to the end of our presentation, I'd like to mention a few challenges. So the first challenge is the brain is immensely complex. It has different types of cells, neurons, glial cells, vascular cells, supportive cells, all involved. Now, how such complex emotions, such higher abstract functions are formed by the firing of few neurons is still not known. Moreover, pathological aggression itself is not because of a single factor. It's because of many factors. Like, as I said, environment plays a huge role. Now, building upon that, again, serotonin, dopamine pathways, both can increase the reactive aggression due to any problem in these pathways. So, in conclusion, I'd say that the current targeted genetic approaches need to be modified. We need a more quantitative and adequately powered hypothesis-free genome-wide SNP sequencing, as in single nucleotide polymorphism, which are individual differences between people at the genetic level, at the level of DNA sequence, and epigenetic analysis, since, as I just discussed, the environment plays a huge role, and again, amongst different age groups. So now Stuti will finish the presentation by asking a few questions.
So as we talked about the first two individuals, you can see that, here, those two individuals made me ask 4 questions that are very important to, think about. Firstly, are criminal mindsets or aggressive behavior inherited or like, born out of circumstances. Like firstly, if you look at Ted Bundy, there was one point in Ted Bundy's life, which says that, he had a grandfather who was arrogant, stubborn, and, and Ted Bundy described him as a very nice personality. So is it possible that Ted Bundy inherited his aggressive behavior, his lack of empathy and sympathy from his grandfather? Can these genes involved with aggression and other emotions be inherited? And if prisons should be subjected to therapy, or rather than or should they pelt out the harsh treatment? And finally, can prisoners be given a second chance with therapy? Next slide is our references, and thank you.
Thank you, Ayush and Stuti, for the interesting talk. I have just few questions. Can you share your screen once?
Sure.
Yes.
So, what are the observations like you are showing? Okay, can you go on the oxytocin receptors one?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what are the observations? What this plot is referring to?
Okay, so this is basically it's from a test called the FIT test. FIT test is a female intruder test, so we normally use it for animals. So in this case, what the scientists did, they basically took a rodent. Now the rodent was allowed to, be accustomed to an experiment setup that is allowed to be the only species there. So that rodent became protective for that place. So now if I introduce a weaker animal, compared to that rodent, now that rodent will display aggressive behavior. Now this is seen in female tigers for their cubs. So there's a huge increase in oxytocin, but that aggression is of short duration. Now that's what the graph shows, that initially the duration of aggression is small, so oxytocin is high. But oxytocin, even when oxytocin decreases, aggression stays, but it's there for a longer duration, which is seen in.
So duration of aggression is in the seconds. So it's a kind of a sudden spike of the oxytocin or any hormone or serotonin.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you are trying to kind of correlate is that the sudden change or sudden increase or peaks in these hormones, it can have its signature on the genes as well, permanent signature on the genes.
No, it's a result of a signature on the genes.
Yes.
So because there is a change at the not at the genetic level, but at the epigenetic level, this happens repeatedly because of DNA methylation.
There are different environmental factors. It's like if you Ayush, if you can go back to our first slide about epigenetics, you can see there are two genomes involved. One is the genome, that is the genes of the organism, and the epigenome, which is how we interact with our the environment in immediate environment. So that caused this.
Okay, so my last question, is there any signature that it's going to be age dependent? Means if you get this environment factors or epigenetic factors, they are going to influence things on the early age, or at any age group person can get affected, or these permanent changes can occur?
So it is mostly early age, because there's this thing in neuroscience where there's this learning phase. Now you tend to, neurons are still being formed at that stage. So if neurons are formed under a particular environment, it's very difficult to change that, because once neurons are lost, they can't reform. So that is why it is mostly related to, early childhood. Like the examples you cited, both of them had stressful childhoods. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ayush. Recommend?
Yes. So in this, you're talking about some changes that epigenetics brings without altering the sequence of genes. So as you said, these changes are brought in early childhood. So are there any ways or techniques where you can deal with, or you can just not cure fully, but can minimize the effect of that in later age?
So in psycho, that involves mostly psychotherapy. So there is something called the CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy. So that if a person is willing to take that therapy and along with other medications, there can be ways we can you cannot exactly, again, it's debatable if we can remove it completely or not, but we can control the marks and the behavior of the person.
Yeah, I'd like to just add on to one point, but the reason why epigenetics is actually such a huge topic nowadays is because epigenetics is reversible. So if we change the
yes.
person's DNA, like that is a permanent change. So if there's anything wrong with that therapy, we can't go back to the original place. But epigenetics is reversible. So for example, DNA methylation, we can remove the DNA methylation and again that gene can be expressed. Or if a gene is expressed, we don't want it to be expressed, we can induce DNA methylation. So in that way, epigenetics is a huge part, plays a huge role.
All right. Thank you.
So, like, I want to ask the question that is there a way to find out, like, to find out the epigenetics, like, what are the to find the exact change in some genes of the DNA, like you said, in epigenetics? So is there a way?
So there is a way because normally as epigenetics, majorly there are three ways epigenetics can modify gene expression. That is DNA methylation. So there, the DNA sequences will be methylated. So normally what happens is the promoter is methylated. So if we can detect that methylation in the promoter, and again there are different ways like Western blot, if I can see whether that mRNA is being expressed or not. So that's how I can detect whether it is an epigenetic change, because if we do a DNA sequencing, we will find the gene, right? But if we do use a technique such as Western blot, where we detect whether the gene is being expressed or not, we won't find that expression of the gene, even though we know that the gene sequence is present. So that would mean that there is an epigenetic modification, because something is preventing that gene from being expressed, even though it is present in our DNA.
Hi. So usually epigenetic marks are reversible. So I just want to know, is it reversible for OSHA, like for shared differentiation also?
Could you repeat it, please?
There are some share which are depend on environment, and there are some share differentiation mechanism. So is it reversible for both the type?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the word.
No, if epigenetic marks are reversible for cell differentiation, if I'm right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, epigenetics is not related to actually cell. It's more related to the gene expression. Like epigenetics is more at the molecular level, right?
Yes.
Like cell differentiation is there is no correlation between that, unless you could say that I have a stem cell. Now, if due to epigenetics, if a gene that is responsible for differentiation of that stem cell into a more differentiated cell, then epigenetics can play a role. But in normal situations, it doesn't have much of a cell. Like obviously everything is related, but this
epigenetics is like since it's molecular level and it's like an upcoming topic, it's been studied in parts. So like first it was studied with in relation with behavior, then it is mostly, like from what I know, it's been studied in the form of behavior because they were able to correlate with different things. So the cell part, since it is like molecular level, I don't think they were able to like come up with any correlation which talks about cell differentiation and epigenetics.
Yes, but in general, like obviously some genes are responsible for cell differentiation. So if there is methylation of those genes, then the cell won't differentiate from the stem cell.
But there isn't like any, I think, distinct specificity.
Okay. So and when the cell division take place, then is there any chance that this reversible process have been taken place, like doing cell division? Like suppose for a child there is nothing like epigenetic mark, but when the cell division take place, then there may be some error, and this epigenetic have been occurred. Is there any case like that?
So it is possible, because when the cell divides, the DNA has to replicate. So during the process of DNA replication, these epigenetic markers can be removed, because for the DNA to be replicated, it has to be unwound and the methylations have to be removed. So again, there is a possibility that the methylation can continue to the next cell line, next cell progeny, or it could not. So that possibility is there, and then that also includes vertical inheritance, as in it can come from the parents or it cannot come from the parents, and it is it's unpredictable, I would say.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So the next presenters are Rohan Kumar and Ankush Kumar from IISER Kolkata and IIT Dhanbad. So they will be presenting on the topic Transit Photometric Analysis of Kepler-17. So Rohan and Ankush, you can start your presentations now.
see the slides?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rohan Kumar, and today I'll be presenting my project on Kepler 17 binary system, which I did along with my friend Ankush Kumar Singh. About the project, here we have basically done transit photometric analysis of Kepler 17 star. We have used a sophisticated Python package LightCurve to plot the phase-folded light curve and fitted the BLS curve to determine the transit duration and period of revolution, and later we have used the results gained from this analysis to calculate the radius of the exoplanet using the Stephan-Boltzmann law and mass of the exoplanet using Keplerian mechanics. So how does a transit event look like? So here we have a diagram showing that on the y-axis we have flux, and on the circular axis is kind of time. So we can see this: if a planet passes in front of a star, there will be a dip in the flux which we receive from that star, and this is called a transit event. And there we can also see an occultation event, which is slightly greater than, like the dip is slightly less than the transit event, because we are having reflection from the planet as well. So, but in this project we'll be focusing on the transit event. So how? So first we have acquired the data from the Kepler telescope, and this is what it looked like. Here we can see two features. One is the periodic pulsation of the star, represented by the sinusoidal kind of nature, and slight dips, which are kind of the spikes, which is of, we can see, is of kind of regular interval. So this suggests that there is some kind of exoplanet over there. So to analyze the data, first we have to remove this kind of pulsation period, because here we are only concerned with the local events, not on the larger time scale event. So we will first flatten out the data, and after flattening we'll get this, and we will remove the outliers and nan values. And then to magnify the short-term events, we have done the flattening, which we can see, like we can clearly see the dip events at regular intervals over here. And in this region there was no data, that's why we don't have anything. But in this region we can see regular dips, and we have removed the stellar pulsation. So now with that light curve we have plotted a power spectrum of the period, and this is how it looks like. And at the maximum power we find that the time period corresponds to 1.4857 days. So this suggests that our dominant frequency in this graph is 1.4857 days. This means that the period of revolution of the planet is this. And after that we have taken the original light curve, this one, and phase folded it. We have phase folded it, and we can see we are having a clear dip around minus 0.4 Julian days, and using this we can clearly calculate the change in flux, which we can later use to calculate the radius of the planet. And this distinct dip of finite width is a confirmation of a transit event. So now we have used the simplest box width model to calculate the dip in the flux, which comes out to be 0.0158, and then we have also calculated the transit duration, like how much time it takes for planet to come and go. So it comes out to be 0.1 days. And now I'll ask my friend Ankush to explain from here.
So now using the dip in the flux data that we have acquired before, we can use the relation over here that we have, that the dip is relative to the radius of the body. So can you go next slide, please? So we can use this relation that the flux is proportional to the radius of the square of the body. From here we can see that delta F by F, which is the relative flux dip, is equal to the square of the planet, radius of the planet divided by the radius of the star. So can you go next slide, please? Here we have put the values of known values substituted the known values into the formula, and got the value of the radius of planet, which is equivalent to 1.2845 Jupiter radius. Now, for the calculation of mass of the planet, we can use, the calculation of radius of planet, we can use the Kepler's third law. We can see that we have a relation between time period and the radius of orbit. So here, but we are assuming that the planet has mass of the planet star is very greater than the mass of the planet. Hence, the orbit is circular. So using this approximation, we get the below relation of the cube of time period is proportional to the square of the orbit. Now, putting the values of that we have acquired from the paper of Bonomo et al., we get the orbit as 0.0258 astronomical units. Now, for the calculation of mass of the exoplanet, can you go to next slide, please? We use the conservation of angular momentum, basically. So here we can see that we are conserving the angular momentum of the planet at the extreme points of the entire system, that is the system of the star and the planet. Next slide. So here we get the relation as mass of the star into velocity of the star equals mass of planet into velocity of the planet. Now we have the mass of the planet we are calculating, and the velocity of the planet is calculated by the orbital radius that we already have. That is Vp is equal to d by Tp. There is a time period of the planet around the star divided by the length of the path. Now, to calculate the velocity of the star, we have used this particular data, which is the velocity amplitude that is plotted by using the radial velocity method. This data we have taken it from Desert et al., and we can see that the velocity amplitude comes out to be 420 meter per second. Next. So substituting this value into the previous formula, we can find the mass of the planet as 843.44 Earth masses. Next. Now, to see where the planet lies or what is the characteristic of the planet, we can see that the planet has a mass of 2.46 Jupiter masses and 13 Jupiter radius. So it's basically like it lies in this region. We can see in this plot in the crowded region, which is most of the exoplanet lies in this region, and this does too. It is a Jovian world. It is a Jupiter-like planet, and since it's very close to its host star, which is 0.0258 astronomical unit, so it is a hot Jupiter. Next. Now we have compared our calculated values of our project with the general literature value that is in the Bonomo et al. Paper, and we can see that we have error percentage is very low over here, and the density we can see is 19.41. That is maybe due to the error in the velocity of the star that we have taken. Next.
Thank you, Ankush and Rohan. So Ankush and Rohan, can you tell me one thing? Which star were you following? Like which star's data were you using?
Kepler 70.
Okay, yeah. So now, and this data, they must be using certain telescope for photometric measurements, which Kepler telescope. Now, one more thing. Why do we measure the period in the Julian days? So you will see this is Julian days. So what do you understand from the Julian days?
So basically, we know that our frame of the Earth is revolving around the sun.
Yes.
And then we have used fixed a reference which we call it 2000 Julian days, which corresponds to year 2000. Not exactly, but close to that. So we have basically used that date as a reference to calculate to tell the position of the star. We have used that because we know that the Earth is moving around the sun, and with each passing year there will be some shift. So we have to keep a fixed reference to calculate the position of each star. So that becomes a standard from let's say when we tell the right ascension and declination of a star or any body, we say some values of the right ascension and declination. That is with respect to 2000 Julian days, and that became a standard in astronomy. That's why to calculate the days and all, we are using this Julian days formula.
Okay. So one more thing. Is there any way in the photometry through which we can also talk about the habitability of any exoplanet?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So basically, where we have characterized the planet, like, first of all, we have made two important deduction. Like it's hot and it's a Jupiter-like planet. So as we know that the radius of the Earth's orbit is around 1 astronomical unit, and it's roughly like 1/100th of that. So we can see that it's really close to the planet, like the host star. So there will be a tidal locking, first of all, we know, because that corresponds to the 6th power of the radius. So one face of the planet will be facing the star, so that will be really hot, and the other one will be really cold as it's away. So we know that the habitable zone can be around the rim only, and it's a Jupiter-like planet which we have deduced from the density.
So
that
I got the idea. Thank you. And one last thing to ask: do you have the spectroscopic data of this exoplanet or no?
No, we didn't talk about the spectroscopy. We have
That
for
would be
the
interesting.
yeah, we agree. Like in the radial velocity, we have used the spectroscopic data to calculate that, but we couldn't.
Oh, thank you, Rohan.
So Rohan and Ankush, you have showed one graph in the beginning where there were spikes at some equal distances, equal time durations. What are these spikes indicate? No, before that.
Okay. So these dips correspond to
the first graph.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, the graph which we see over here is basically this graph. We have removed the long-term events, like long-term pulsation of star. We have removed so that we can get this flattened spectra.
That's all right. I'm talking about these spikes, like
okay, these ones. These ones.
Not these. The below lines.
Okay. That correspond to the transit event.
Transient events.
Yeah.
And later to find out, to verify time period, you are doing phase folding. What is that?
Yeah, so basically we have, let's say over here, I am focusing on these two lines. Okay.
All right.
Like these two. And I'm taking the length of that curve to be the width of these two dips, and then folding it, like I'm making a burrito kind of, like from the rightmost end, I'm taking the value and then keeping it on top of it.
All
just
right.
like how we make like paper fans and all.
Okay.
That's what we are basically doing. So that we can get an idea of how the dip is like. Because if we know that a transient event is happening, so each event must be identical to the other one. So basically, if we phase fold all of them, we should get a clear dip, so that we can do analysis on that.
Okay. And
to calculate the time.
One more graph. In one more graph, you are calculating the width of the dip. So can you go to that? Yes. So here you are choosing a particular position to find out. You are not going really to the dip, to the tip of the width. Sorry.
Yeah.
Of the curve. Yeah. So why is that particular point only?
We have taken the simplest box width model. If we would have taken a Gaussian model, we could have gone to the lower end as well.
So which one would be more accurate?
Gaussian one. Gaussian one would have been more better.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So, Rohan and Ankush, I want to ask, like in the beginning you have mentioned the Stephen Boltzmann law, right? You have used it. You have calculated the radius. So, like, in 3D, so can you tell me the general expression we use in 3 dimensions? So can you tell me the Stephen Boltzmann law in 2 dimensions?
can try, like in 3D we are having flux dip as like the flux is proportional to the surface area. So it will be okay. So in the like we are having
no relation with the temperature.
okay.
Like
So the
there
temperature
it's
term
T to the power 4. So what is the temperature dependence in 2 dimensions?
that shouldn't change. Only the surface area term would change. Right now we are having 4 pi r square, and in this we will have 2 pi r.
No, it's actually it changes the temperature dependence changes with dimensions. You can check it out. It changes with dimensions as T to the power number of dimensions plus 1. So in 2D it's proportional to T2. Okay. So another question is like, can you move like this at the last like yeah just this one. No before. Yeah. So here you are assuming that orbit is nearly circular. So why are you doing so?
This is because the mass of the host star is very large as compared to the mass of the host planet. That's why. Because there will be, due to the mass of the exoplanet, there will be a little bit like eccentricity in the orbit, but it will be very less. So it will almost circular.
Also, we can see from the radial velocity data that the radial velocity curve, the projection of the radial velocity, the radial velocity which we detect is nearly sinusoidal. This means if it would have been an elliptical orbit, then the orbit of the star would have been elliptical as well. So this sinusoidal, the nature which we are getting would have some kind of like tilt to the left or the right. It wouldn't have been so perfect.
So you got this rate from where have you got this radial velocity?
Yeah, it's from Desert et al. We have mentioned
from the data.
Yeah, we have taken their data.
Okay.
We have used their deduction over here to deduce that the orbit is circular and to calculate the maximum radial velocity.
So do you think it will be more accurate in the can we increase the accuracy if we include the if we take the orbit to be elliptical rather than circular?
We could.
Thank you.
Even if we take a reference of our solar system, we know that all the planets are almost like circular orbits with really small eccentricity. So it would be a really good assumption to make that the orbit is elliptical, like circular. But yeah, if we would have taken a modeled it with using an elliptical orbit, we would have got a better result.
Yeah, you would have got better result because otherwise, like, in the planner in our solar system, like as you are saying that we can take it to be circular, but we don't take it to be circular, but because they have low eccentricity, but that makes a lot of difference, right, compared to the circular orbit. So I think like you should definitely increase that, the efficiency will be definitely increased if you consider them to be really elliptical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So hi. So my question is, whenever you take measurement, so just one change never tell you that it is a exoplanet. So why one change is not enough for saying that it is a exoplanet? What could be possible source of error?
Yeah, there can be possible sources of error because we are having just a single data point. For transit event to occur, like it's a regular event, so it makes sense to observe for a longer time period and then calculate.
I mean, what are the possible error for false positive?
In this case?
Yeah, in this case, how can we get a false positive? You know what is false positive?
Yes. Yeah, so false positive could be due to like any other rogue planet or something is coming in front of our detector and the solar system which we are observing. That could be one, and there could be some error in the problems in our detector as well, or some regular fluctuation which is happening in the circuitry. That could also trigger a false positive.
And
that's why it's better to observe for a longer period of time so that we can minimize it.
And my second question is, how can you verify that when you find the exoplanet, is it extragalactic or not?
We can basically do that. Like, if we first of all, we can have two cases. If we are having our solar system plane like this, and we are observing something over here, so we can be pretty much sure that we will not find our planets over here. If we are observing something which is in plane of our solar system, then we can calculate the orbital position. We are having so many probes to calculate the accurate positions, and then we can tell like, okay, that must have been our planet or not. If it's outside our orbital plane, because our orbit of all the major planets is pretty much flat. So if we are observing something, let's say at 89 degrees over there, so it doesn't make sense it's not possible for our planet to come as a false positive. Also, in the data, we can that planet is revolving around that star, and our planet is revolving around our star. So the pattern of dip which we'll see will not be as regular, because here we are observing for, let's say, 5 minutes or 6 minutes, and we are getting some data which we are observing over many quarters. But if we know that the period of revolution of all the planets, it's really large as compared to what analysis which we are doing. It's not possible for any other planet. The period comes out to be 1.48 days. So if we are observing, and we know that in general, planets are having a time period of 1 year or something. So it's really difficult for the planet from our solar system to come into this false positive.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rohan and Ayu. We can go to the next slide.
So the next presenters would be Sagnik Bajpai and Anubhav Ghoshal from Institute of Science, BHU, and they will be presenting on material science.
Hello, are we audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, can you see the screen? Okay.
Now
Yes.
it's starting up.
So, just a second, please. Is the presentation visible?
Yes, it is visible. Segment.
Okay, so can we start?
Yes, please start.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, namaste from Banaras Hindu University. Myself, Anubhav Ghoshal, along with my partner in crime, Sagnik Bajpai. Today, we shall be presenting conducting morphs to you. Now, as you can see, this is a very basic picture of conducting morph that has been given here, or basically it's a morph. Now, what we are going to explain here is a molecular level understanding of the charge storage and the charging dynamics of supercapacitors that have been built using morph electrodes and ionic liquids as electrolytes. Now, let's build the basics here. What are morphs? Morphs are basically metal organic frameworks. That is just the full form of it. The abbreviation is morph. They are actually crystalline solids or compounds which have metal centers or clusters that are connected by organic linkers units, or which are also known as struts. So basically, when we put these things together, they combine and assemble by themselves. It's a case of self-assembly. This results into, this self-assembly brings about a certain amount of pore formation. So basically morphs have a lot of empty spaces, and due to the formation of such empty spaces, they can be used in a wide variety, in a diverse variety of fields, such as hydrogen storage, electrocatalysis, catalysis in general, in fields of semiconductors as well, ion separation, gas separation, ferroics, ferromagnetic materials, and even drug delivery, and something that the world is actually working on these days a lot, that is carbon capture in the field of environment. So this is how amazing morphs are. This is how versatile morphs actually are. And now the main character, the main role, the main concept behind the morph that can actually trigger the effect of morph is the concept of porosity. That is the size of the pores. And the beauty of morphs is that these pores are basically quite regular in shape. That means every pore is more or less similar in shape and its dimensions. Now, the question now, what is the first thing that you see is we started this presentation by saying that we are going to discuss conductive morphs. So morphs which actually conduct or store electricity. Now, you might wonder that there is porosity and now there is charge conduction. These two things never go hand in hand. When we say that something is supposed to carry charge, then it has to be a metal. It has to be a metal or some kind of liquid, so that the mediums, the molecules are held together. They're bound together, so that the charge can actually flow with ease. However, in contrast with that philosophy, we are considering morphs which are basically made of empty spaces. So it is indeed possible. The conduction of charges is actually possible through morphs, and there are certain pathways that morphs actually follow. And can you hold on a second, please? Okay. Yes. So there are several pathways that morphs actually follow for charge conduction. We can discuss some basics. One is the through bond pathway, in which the morphs basically the charge flows through the coordinate bond now or the dative bond. Now, a dative bond or coordinate bond is basically like a beggar and a rich person relationship, where a rich person has more electron and beggar, he wants the electron, and the rich person can easily donate electron and expect nothing in return from the beggar. So now this basically happens is that the charge flows from metal centers and the functional groups that are there in the struts. And what kind of functional groups is going to flow is actually concerned with the type of linkers we are using. So we may use anthracene, naphthalene, or some bigger polyaromatic compounds, through which will actually form layers, two-dimensional layers, and we are going to stack them up one on top of the other, and then the charges are going to flow through them. Now, what are supercapacitors? So let us first consider what are capacitors. Capacitors are a charge storing devices. So if we talk about normal capacitors, the stored charge is proportional to the potential. So if we want to store a very huge amount of charge in a normal capacitor, the voltage will get very high, which is not suitable for industry applications. So supercapacitors are a specific type of capacitors, which is a very high capacitance in a very low voltage. Now, the charge stored in the capacitor can be calculated by a differential formula, which is given that dC is equal to dq by dV. Now, what are the problems with the supercapacitors? The normal traditionally made supercapacitors are made of metals. Now, these metals are always low dimension materials. So when these metallic plates accumulate electron, there is a phenomena called quantum capacitance, which adds up with the total capacitance in a series, which actually lowers the total capacitance. Actually, in the low dimension electrodes, this quantum capacitance is dominated over the electrolytic capacitance and actually lowers the total capacitance, which is the problem with normal supercapacitors. And morphs, this is specifically metal organic frameworks, are as an excellent way out to these problems. So how actually morphs works in this? So we consider morphs as the 2D dense stack of sheets. So, and they are porous materials. So as they are porous materials, they are not considered to be a low dimensional materials. So they work as a porous metallic electrode, which is excellent to exclude the phenomena of quantum conductance. Now, so for the morph, the total stored charge can be calculated two ways. The first one is the charge stored in the pores, and the second portion is the charge stored in the surface area. So as the morph has a huge amount of pores, and so we can actually neglect the charge stores on the surface area and clearly focus on the pores, which is the main working principle of that. Thank you, Sagnik. Now, coming to the material that we are actually talking about. We are trying to build capacitors, the supercapacitors. So in order to do that, we are considering a pre-existing concept that is basically EDLCs. These are electrical double layer capacitors. Here, the electrodes that we are using are made up of Morphs. So basically, these are perforated electrodes. Perforated electrodes means and we are using Morphs. So basically, there are a lot of pores which will enhance the surface area of this and also the aspect ratio, that is the surface by volume or the surface by mass ratio, due to which more amount of charge can actually be accumulated on the surface. This will enhance the charging and discharging in phenomenon, as well as in a circuit, in an electrochemical circuit, as the principle says, we need to use an electrolyte. And for the sake of an electrolyte, we are considering RTI, which are actually room temperature ionic liquids. Now, the versatility of these things is that these ionic liquids are being used because of certain abilities that they have. One is they have extremely good thermal stability, which we actually need because charge is being conducted, energy is being dissipated. But if they are thermally stable, and this is also a problem which generalized Morphs used to have. One is that they were non-conducting, that they were insulating in nature, and the second was thermal stability. However, the introduction of such ionic liquids enhances these abilities. Now that and these ionic liquids are also non-volatile. That means they are not going to vaporize easily. They have a wide range of temperature that can be brought into an advantage here. That is, there's a huge difference, huge gap between the boiling point, the melting point, and the boiling point. So they provide and also provide a wide electrochemical window. That means the potential, we can actually play with the potential here. So what we use, as I mentioned earlier, we were going to use the through space pathway. So basically we took a Morph. You can read the name here. I won't bother you with the name of the material that we have used. The first one is basically a 2D conductive Morph sheets we are using as electrodes, and they have one-dimensional pores in them, one or two-dimensional, actually quasi 1D pores. So and you can definitely see the name of the electrolyte that we are using. Now we try to do certain molecular dynamic simulations through these things. So what we did is basically here in the first simulation, you can actually see the type of Morphs that we have built, the linkers you can see. Basically, as you see from when I go from here, from the row B, you can see that the linkers, the size of the linker increases. As the size of the linker increases, the resultant Morph becomes more, the pore size of it also increases. So more pore size means the more amount of cations and anions that you can see, which are the cations and anions over here mentioned. They can be accumulated. Now the next simulation was basically on the ion and charge distribution that we can, and this was measured at zero potential, that is the PZC. PZC, we actually expect that maximum correlation will take place, and you can actually see the result, how they have been distributed here. And this is actually the most important part that I want to draw your attention to, that when the negative potential, when there's a change of potential, when there's a negative potential, we see that we can see the distribution of the charges over the central region and surface region. Clearly, it is visible that when it is actually negative. And yes, we have considered a certain diameter which represents the center. That is RC. We have taken it about 0.25 nanometers, which is inside that is the central region, and which goes beyond that is considered the surface region. So you can obviously see that the charges like to accumulate more over the surface region. So this proves better for a capacitor. Now, Sagar, please take over. Next go.
Okay. So now we are talking about the charge dynamics of the supercapacitors. You can see the basic equation Q T is equal to Q infinite into 1 minus this the creepy type of expression. This is because of the formation of supercapacitors. Now talking about the key points, this Q infinity is the charge stored at T is equal to infinity. Now here we are going to about the relaxation time, which is C area into L divided by sigma. Here we have to take care that if the pore length is small, then the saturation current will be attained at a very low time. So we can say that small pore supercapacitors are very useful in that case. So now with this we can conclude our talk. We have seen what are Morphs and what are supercapacitors, the problems with the conventional supercapacitors, and how Morphs actually kills that problem. So
in that case, we can suggest that this thing's promising. This is suggest a promising avenues for designing supercapacitor with both high energy and power densities. So now these are our references, and thank you.
Thank you so much. It will close it.
Okay, thank you, Sagnik and Nabu. Sagnik, can you tell us about your background? What are you doing right now? In which,
Sir, I am in the physics, BSc Physics Honors, and he is in BSc Chemistry Honors.
Chemistry Honors. Okay. And which year? Third year?
We actually do interdisciplinary works together.
What are you saying? Can you please repeat?
We actually do interdisciplinary works like material science and spectroscopy together.
Okay. And which year are you? In third year?
Second year again.
Second. Okay, so tell me one thing. Are you working in the lab? Are you trying to, this is the methods that you are proposing, or have done the research, or is there any work in laboratory that has been done by you on this?
Not exactly, sir. Unfortunately, this is the work on conducting morphs. The conductive morphs, actually, these concepts, they have been, morph, actually, they have been around for 25 years, but conductive morphs, they have been around for 10 years or less than that. And unfortunately, in India, there are no scientists as of now. To my knowledge, there are no scientists who are working on that. This is actually this was taken. You can see the reference also. There's M. Dinka. That he's a professor at MIT. That's his paper. We took his paper, and from that paper, we brought out the insights that we could gather and presented it. Okay. So. Yeah. So
can you tell us, means you have presented it quite well, mainly what are the positive features, means what kind of challenges that you do see in the implementing this method? Like in case you want to implement in the lab.
The implementation, you're asking about what challenges we might face, right?
Yes.
Okay. Morphs, they have the problem with the morphs is their thermal stability, and also that they are actually insulators. Morphs are basically insulators. Metal centers are there, but we have to deal with what we have to do is we have to play with the linkers. We have to choose proper linkers and proper metals which would actually conduct. And because we are talking about morphs, we have to consider the pore engineering. And since we are talking about circuits and electrochemical circuits, basically it's quite important that we choose suitable electrolytes. That's what's going to make the difference. However, controlling certain amount means controlling the pore size, which is actually a good feature about.
Okay. Just tell me one more thing. Let's say I'll give you a challenge. One thing is, do you want to establish the thermal stability of the system? And the challenge is to gain very low temperature for the system. Which kind of method you will implement for gaining a very low temperature for this kind of technique? Anything that you might have to do.
Okay, for yours, that high thermal stability at low temperature.
Yes,
that's the case, right? Okay. Okay, I'm going to break it into two parts, and I'm going to try. When we are talking thermal stability, so I think it should be more stable. So we might consider metal, and it's again coming to the metals and linkers. We might use linkers which have larger chains, so that they will have higher means what the melting point and the boiling point will be higher. So there will be more number of carbon attached. And metals we have to use proper, which are actually thermostable metals. So we can work on bigger metals. We can actually use bigger sized metals. But then again, we have to see with the simulation whether how the charges react to it. And considering the second part of it, that was at low temperature. At low temperature, when you say that conductivity at low temperature, something we can consider the superconductor. We could use niobium metal in these cases, because niobium, as we all know, these are superconductors. So we could make niobium morphs. This could be a possibility.
So the challenge is to attain a temperature roughly around 5 Kelvin. How are you going to achieve that?
5 Kelvin. Yeah. 5 Kelvin. That's too low. We are talking about. Yes. Quite interesting. Okay. So an electrolyte.
Any traditional method through which you can attain
like Joule-Thomson expansion? We can use this.
Joule-Thomson will work by 5 Kelvin or anything else?
No, yes. Lower temperature means perhaps you could use those superconducting metals as the metal centers. For electrolytes, we could use electrolytes which might contain something liquid nitrogen. We could induce other
What
components.
do you think about the adiabatic demagnetization?
Pardon? Adiabatic?
Demagnetization.
Adiabatic is also a good process.
Would that work? For such low temperatures?
Like Joule-Thomson expansion is also depend on this adiabatic demagnetization, I think, most probably.
That's the higher step. Joule-Thomson is the first one, and then to further lower the temperature, we go for the adiabatic demagnetization. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Sagnik and Abhinav.
Just one information that we actually wanted to share when we actually make these structures. The characterization, of course, we did not show it in the slides. This should be. I wanted to share this. The characterization is basically done by using TEM and the SEM. We try to see the 2D structure. We use.
I think Rekha ma'am will ask the question on that. Okay. Ma'am?
Yes. So you're talking about these MOFs which have special kind of structure. So what is the preparation method that is used to prepare such structures?
Preparation methods in general, we actually take the components in very small proportions, like we consider milligrams. We don't even use like any spatula to take this material. We use those micro pipettes and such systems so that very minute quantity is taken. And what happens is that after mixing, we get the reaction mixture, and we place those reaction mixture into something known as a copper grid. We place them into the copper grid.
I'm not talking about sample preparation for TEM sample. I'm talking about the preparation of Morphs only.
And generally, we basically take very minute quantities of these based upon the compatibility. Means how the link, and then what happens is self-assembly takes place.
Self-assembly.
Yes, ma'am. Self-assembly.
What other materials do self-assemble? Any other material? There are some
of course,
more materials.
Rotamers, rotaxanes, and catenases. 2016 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Rotaxanes and catenases. Those are macromolecules, self-adjusting, self-assembling. Rotaxanes and catenases. Rotamers, basically, molecular engines.
What is the main difference between SEM and TEM?
SEM and TEM. Okay. TEM, basically the beam goes through the material, so we get a 2D structural representation of it. And in case of SEM, basically a scanning of the surface takes place, so we get how the 3D model would look like.
What information can we extract from these two techniques?
From SEM and TEM, right?
Yes.
From TEM, of course, we can get the 2D visualization that we need, the surface visualization that we need, and from SEM, we can the scanning electron microscopy. We can definitely get the whole 3D view of the material and how it looks in space in a space orientation that we can get.
So TEM gives you just 2D image or something else, something more.
Most likely to that is basically the data that we generally look for while we put the sample in the TEM. There might be other things, but unfortunately, I'm unaware of knowledge.
Are you aware about SAED?
No, sorry.
All right. Thank you.
Could you please could you please tell me the full form of it? Maybe there's a possibility.
It's a selective diffraction, selective area electron diffraction.
Selective area electron diffraction. We could obviously throw a hunch, but that should be the case. So we would like to
think about it, because TEM is much more useful than SEM. It gives you a lot of information apart from its just the images, so you can extract much more from that. Okay.
Yes. For characterization, we can also use the BET analyzer that gives us the idea of the surface area, the aspect ratio also, which is actually quite useful when it comes to such materials.
All right.
Okay. So you both said that we are using supercapacitors here. We can't use the normal capacitors. So like my question is, so basically your purpose is to store as much as like large amount of charge, right? So can't you do that by if like you know that if we put dielectric inside the capacitor, the capacitance increases, right? So can't we? So is it necessary? So why do we use supercapacitors? Can't we just put a dielectric material with a very high dielectric constant, and wouldn't that work? Why do we need that supercapacitors?
If we are talking about charge storage, like the material which has the maximum dielectric constant. So in the supercapacitor, we are talking about storing a huge amount of charge, which is like if we talk about the normal capacitors with a dielectric can store like 100 or 200 times more than that. So it is not possible to use a dielectric and store that amount of charge.
And just for the sake of the numbers, I would like to give you a figure here. When we are, the beauty of these materials is that if you take even 1 gram of it, 1 gram of morph, which is actually you cannot even feel it if you place it on the tip of your finger, that has this ability to cover the surface area of about 8,000 meters square. So how huge it is, you can basically imagine. And if we use these things in large proportions in capacitors, then the amount of charge that we can actually store, it's quite interesting to even assume these things.
Okay, thank you.
So you talk about you want to store charge in supercapacitor. So basically you have to use that charge. So how you can use a capacitor as a battery? That's my question.
Partner, how we can use capacitors as batteries? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay. In the discharging process, like we add a capacitor with a normal volt, like a normal potential, and then started charging. After it get fully charged, we can actually open this battery portion and just connect a bulb with it, or connect a normal circuit with it, then it will start discharging. So in that process, we can use it as a battery.
Basically coupling that we are
coupling. Yes.
So is the same thing work with the supercapacitor if we just do that coupling, or we have to do something more?
The charge that are stored in supercapacitors are huge, so we cannot use it in normal circuits. Like supercapacitors are mainly used in the designing of quantum computers or like very high laser things. So possibilities that we can use, because at the end of the day, these capacitors and have specific properties of charging and discharging. It is indeed basic property of capacitors, but not for normal circuits. We can use it in quantum circuits or this quantum gates. In that case, we can use this.
Certain modifications have to be put into action.
So, but in quantum computer,
we have to share the screen.
Yeah, we have to share the screen. Can you please give us some time? Yes. Actually, see, when the more charges are accumulated on the plates, on the perforated plates, it means that better amount of more charges means there will be obviously more surface energy, better capacitance. Yes. Yes, you can see over here actually how the things have been, the surface region, how the charges have been accumulated here in the C, the row C. You can see how it has been. The radial distribution we have shown. We have taken RC. RC is basically critical radius. For the scientists, they had considered it as 0.2 nanometers. Whatever is outside that goes to the surface region. And upon changing the polarities and the potential, this is how the charges, they actually arrange themselves, either on the surface or the central region. You can also see the radial distribution over here also, how the distribution goes on. Yes.
So it should be linear or power 2 by 3?
Pardon?
Linear or exponential, like power 2 by 3. It's a Gaussian wave packet, looks like, not linear actually.
So obviously not linear, actually it's a Gaussian surface we are considering, so it has to be, there will be peaks here.
Yeah, there are peaks, but it should be linear now because there is no thickness. So that volume is eventually, thickness is show you that volume eventually considered as a 2D plane. So it should be linear in that sense. Then why the Gaussian?
Okay. Yes, that is quite a viable question. There's something to think about. And if I were to answer it, then we could say that although we are considering 2D materials, we are basically considering stacks of 2D materials. Means 2D layers, there's layer upon layer, right? So means we are using multiple layers and stacking them together in one plate. Then there's another plate where the same stack actually is present. So for that reason, we are actually considering the Gaussian surface.
Okay, fine.
Stop sharing. Okay. So we have stopped sharing the screen.
Yeah, you can stop sharing your screen. So the next presenters and the last presenters for today and the end of the event, it would be Navneet and Samiksha from the Hindu College and Ramjas College. They would be presenting on the topic laser cooling.
So, am I audible and my screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, fine. So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am Samiksha Roy. Today, me and my groupmate Navneet are presenting laser cooling. So, still now, everyone hears about laser heating or laser heats things up. So, by laser weapon or by using laser, we can like cut the material sheets or still. So here, this topic is kindly different from the laser heating. This is laser cooling. So my next slide is laser cooling. So before starting this topic, I just introduce some classical and thermodynamical side theory for this, like easy to understand this theory or concept. Like we know the kinetic energy 3/2 kBt. Kb is the Boltzmann's constant, is equals to the half mc square average. C average is the average velocity. So here from this equation we can see the hot particles indicates the first move, and the cold particles indicates the slow move. So here we can change our velocity by changing our temperature. Here the thermal motion is the perturbation effect, or we know the perturbation effect means energy splitting or G-man effect, everything comes, and we can reduce our velocity distribution, means Maxwell-Boltzmann velocity distributions by the adiabatic compression. So this is the main classical thermodynamical concept behind this. So we can reach microkelvin, even the nanokelvin range in temperature by using this technique. So the whole thing, the laser cooling is based on totally four parts. One thing is photon recoil, second one is Doppler cooling, and third one is the optical molasses, and fourth one is the magneto-optical trap. These are the parts of the laser cooling. So photon coil is nothing. It's just about like atom. When it collides with photon, it's like a pumping things. The atom gains or absorb more energy than the something momentum. It's transferred to the atom, and again, but after instantly atoms re-emits the photon. So its photon exits or emits in any random direction. So there is the momentum change. It indicates the force also comes in this picture. So we can see the energy change also. And then using this energy, energy we will use here. So using the relativistic energy and using the Taylor series expansion, we can just the Taylor series expansion in the energy shift like H omega ik or H omega ik, then is equals to the relativistic energy, and then okay. Is this? So here the omega ik is equals to the from the Taylor series expansion we can calculate this thing. So for the time shortage, it's I'm like sorry to kind of explain this, but from the concept of Taylor series and the relativistic energy we can calculate this equation. So Doppler shift is brings it's from here the second term represent the first Doppler shift, and the second third term represent the second order Doppler shift. So what is Doppler shift and Doppler cooling, that I will explain later. So here just before I just before some time I just say the force will be somehow comes in this picture by the momentum transfer, momentum change. And then Doppler cooling is nothing but like the light closer to resonance with the atom and thereby increase the rate of absorption from this beam. So it's two types, red shift and the second one is blue shift. Blue shift means atom and the laser beam in the same direction, and the red shift means laser and the atoms in the opposite direction. And in the red shift we can see the light closer to the resonance with the atom. So from up to after this after this optical molasses is the new technique, or optical molasses. It's actually slows down the atom when just we use 6 coupled laser beam on an atom for a long time. We can see by after like interacting for a long time, the atom's movement is going to slow. And then optical molasses, there is the expression for the, because the damping force for the laser beam, there is the force equation which represents this the damping equation, and from there for the rate shift tuning we can see, and using this equation and the graph for this here for delta is equals to minus gamma, the dotted curve means the red curve, the move here the there is the frictional force in optical molasses, and the curve is more trapping, means the atoms are trapped here. So after this, the magneto-optical trap. Magneto-optical trap is nowadays it's briefly discuss the magneto-optical trap, that is the force magnetic using the magnetic quadrupole fields. Means here the magnetic field also comes. So there is a G-man shift. G-man shift means energy difference equals to magnetic field into the mu. The Letokov, the scientist who proposed to use the potential minima of a three-dimensional standing optical field composed by the superposition of three perpendicular standing waves. And the magneto-optical trap is nothing but actually the anti-Helmholtz arrangement. Here from the three directions the laser beams comes, and also there is a mirror and magnetic field. So the magnetic field is linearly proportional to the direction, means B is equals to BZ. And for this the two opposite, in these two opposite direction current flows. So here the atoms are trapped in the center, and there we need a restoring force also, because for the atom to be fixed in this central. So here the force equation is the restoring force, and also the minus A dot V, which I already introduced in the previous slide. So here is the totally the schematic experimental setup, which nowadays used in the laboratories. And from here my groupmate Navneet will explain.
Thank you, Samiksha. So, good afternoon, judges. And from this, we'll discuss about application of laser cooling. So, laser cooling is primarily used to create ultra-cold atoms for experimental in quantum physics. And these experiments are performed near absolute zero, where unique quantum effects such as Bose-Einstein condensation can be observed. Or it implies we can say that Bose-Einstein condensation is a main application of laser cooling. Second thing, laser cooling has primarily been used on atoms, but recent progress has been made toward laser cooling more complex systems. And potential practical application for anti-shock cooling of solids, including radiation balance, solid-state laser, and vibration-free optical refrigerator. So, Samiksha, please, next slide. So, this is the main application of trapped ion, which are laser cooled to the 0 point of motion. So, although Doppler cooling should yield sufficiently small time dilation shifts for frequency standards, there are now appear to other reasons for achieving better laser cooling at very low kinetic energy, and the quantum nature of motion being apparent. This quantized motion, particularly the zero state, can be used for various purposes. So, to improve quantum limited signal to noise ratio in the detection process, spectroscopy is performed on atoms which are first prepared in particular quantum mechanically correlated and entangled states. The frequency stability would be given by the given formula rather than the given case. In this case, the time to reach a desired measurement precision would be reduced in proportion to 1 by m. So, on conclusion, we can conclude that this technique that have been developed to reduce the temperature of atoms from 1000 Kelvin to 1 micro Kelvin has no enormous impact on atomic physics. Laser cooling has made it possible to manipulate neutral atoms in completely new ways and to trap them by magnetic field and dipole forces. So, Thank you, everyone.
So here the Nobel laureates are there, Stephen Chu, Claudie Cohen and Tanozi and William D. Phillips. They got Nobel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Samiksha and Navneet. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Navneet, would you like to tell me what do you understand from Bose-Einstein condensation?
Can you repeat, sir?
What do you understand from Bose-Einstein condensation?
So, condensation actually used in statistical physics for the study of fermions and bosons and just small particles.
So one more thing, Aniksha. Tell me one thing. Lasers are going to be monochromatic, so that means they are going to provide you the light of a single wavelength with certain bandwidth, obviously. So now you are having a gas, let's say some atoms, ions. Now ions, if you are going to think about the ions in the room, they are going to follow Maxwell distribution, velocity distribution. So means your ions are going to have different velocities. So means to cool a particular atom, you are going to require a photon of different energy. Is it? Because they are going to have Doppler shift in the forward direction or backward direction. Is it? Am I correct, or is it something else?
No. It's a single frequencies required. No.
So
one frequency.
Okay, a single frequency laser can. Okay. Then can we? How large a system we can cool down with the lasers cooling? Because you are using the 6 lasers coming from the 6 different directions. So how big a system we can cool down by? Atomic scale, molecular, or some bigger scale we can cool down?
The atomic particles, they have different velocities relative them. So I think after some time, I think they will cool down by ion particles. So using the magnetic field and the optical trap and optical trap, we can using the laser single beam laser light, we can automatically cooling down the atoms. I think so.
Okay, thank you so much.
So in this, you have somewhere stated that kinetic energy of the particle is 3/2 kBT. About law of equipartition of energy. I'm not able to hear.
I think her screen full.
Navneet, you can answer. I think her network connection is lost.
Please, ma'am, repeat question.
State law of equipartition of energy.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What is law of equipartition of energy? What does it state?
Law of equipartition energy is state that if we have a system of system that contains different gases in this, and each molecule have their so the total energy of gaseous state is depend on the particular energy of the gas.
Means per degree freedom, just we add half kBT of energy.
Okay, Samiksha. Samiksha, please turn on your camera. So in this, you're talking about cooling down of atoms by lasers. And you're talking about Doppler shift also. What is Doppler shift?
Doppler shift is velocity. Because of the velocity difference, they introduce a term like omega dot vi. This is the Doppler shift because light because of the relative energy, when atoms and the laser beams, they move like in opposite direction or somehow in the same direction, there we just need the relative velocity. And because of the relative velocity, we just here the Doppler effect is coming, like the reference frame of reference and all.
Okay, so in this atoms are moving randomly. So you have put lasers. So you can have an atom approaching laser and going away from laser. Okay, one atom approaching laser, another atom going away from laser, and you are shining light of particular frequency. So which atom out of these two would absorb the laser light of a particular frequency?
The which is on opposite direction.
Which is on opposite direction. All right, thank you.
Okay. So Navneet and Samiksha, I have a question. Like in laser cooling, we are basically trying to lower the temperature. So you said that temperature in up to nanokelvins is also achieved. So like my question is 0 Kelvin temperature attainable?
No, 0 Kelvin is not possible. Even we already we can do superconductivity, but it's high temperature. But in laser cooling, we can up to do like micro Kelvin or nano Kelvin, but not 0 Kelvin.
So why 0 Kelvin is not attainable? Some law says that.
Atom's velocity can never
Which
be
law of
zero.
thermodynamics says that?
Yeah, atom's velocity can never be zero. We can't
Like there is some law of there is a law of thermodynamics that says that. Do you know?
What? Pardon?
0 Kelvin temperature is not attainable. Out of the 4 laws of thermodynamics, zero is first and second and third. Out of them, one law says that 0 Kelvin is not attainable. So which law says?
It's fourth, zeroth. Yeah, it's fourth law, thermodynamics.
Fourth means?
Fourth or third. Second is to not. First one is not. Entropy. It's. I can't remember now, but first or second is not possible. So third. I confuse between third and fourth.
It's 0, first, second, or third. Okay, leave it. So, like in the screen, like, can you share your screen again?
1 second. Give me 1 second. Navneet, can you share the screen? Because
okay, I'll just say. So, like in the second screen or maybe third screen, you had written somewhere like photon is colliding an atom, and it is giving some of its energy to the atom, and then it is colliding and then going away in some other direction. You had written this, right? So, for the momentum of the atom, you had written the final momentum of the atom is initial momentum plus h bar k, where h bar k is the momentum of the photon. So I didn't get, like, photon is just colliding and it's moving away. It's not being absorbed by the atom. So hello, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. I'm sharing my screen. This one, right?
Yeah. So here you have written that the momentum of the photon is h bar k. So it is colliding with the atom, and then the photon is moving away, like right. So it will give it some energy and momentum to the atom. So how have you written the final momentum to be initial momentum plus h bar k? Like the electron is colliding, so it will give some momentum, right? So how is it giving the whole momentum to it?
Like also in Compton effect or any other quantum scattering, the initial.
You are not audible now.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So, like in Compton effect or any other quantum scattering.
Your voice is echoing.
Yeah, something problem.
Okay, yeah, now you're audible.
Yeah. So the momentum though is what is the initial momentum, like h cut pi for the photon, and when it transfer its momentum to the atom, then some portion of the photons energy already it's gone. So because the atom absorbs energy from the photons, so the final the momentum is h cut pk. So the h cut omega is the h cut k is the momentum transfer between, or the loss between the initial and final. So from here, using the conservation of the quantum energy or something, we can reach this equation h cut like pk is equals to pi plus h cut k.
No, it's wrong. It can't be h bar k because the photon is not absorbed, right? The photon, when photon is colliding and it is going away, so photon itself has also some momentum. So it will just give it will give some part of its momentum, right? And you have written the total momentum of the photon is given to the atom. You just check it, okay? And my next question is, like, you are talking about lasers, right? So like is are the lasers perfectly coherent?
No, it's perfectly it's not possible, but maximally lasers nowadays though it's possible to make coherent lasers.
No, like
But
you have coherence length. Do you know what is coherence length?
yeah, it's the phase difference or the path difference is completely zero. It's monochromatic light.
So what is the coherence length?
Coherent length is LC is equals to C by it's
No, just what is the meaning like?
After coherent length is after a certain length when the phase difference is going to zero between the two and the laser is completely monochromatic, means single beam.
No, like coherence length is like, okay, you read about it. Okay, thank you.
Hi, so I have just a simple question. Can we do some non-linear polyatomic molecule by laser cooling or just single atom?
Pardon?
Like what all the particles you can cool by this method?
Who? Sorry, I can't understand your question.
Like, can you cool some polyatomic molecule like Ca or CH3 or just one or two molecules like linear molecule?
Sorry, I'm not able
Yes,
to
we can
answer.
see in the chat box.
Sorry.
So Samiksha, question is, can you cool down the non-linear molecules by using the laser cooling molecule? Non-linear molecules.
Can you cool poly one second?
Am I audible?
Yeah, okay.
So Hers is asking, can you cool down non-linear molecules by using laser cooling? Am I right, Hers?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, obviously. If we can do this experiment in neutral atoms, then obviously atomic molecules also can cool by laser cooling.
If we cool by simple method, then there is a problem, na? Like they have different atoms which have different sides. So if you go photon from one side, then it gives energy to the other side. So we can't cool directly. Both could be the method to do that. There is a special method for doing this. What is that method?
For dielectric, I'm not able to answer.
Have you ever listened about cryogenic technology?
Cavity?
Cryogenic. Let me write cryogenic.
Cryogenic.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you, Samiksha. And Navneet.
Okay, so now we have reached the end of the competition. So now the head of our physics society, Shalika, will give the vote of thanks. So everyone is requested to stay back for a while. We will have a group photograph also after that. So now I invite Shalika for the vote of thanks.
Yeah, so I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So first of all, hello everybody. Firstly, it brings me immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Physics Society of St. Stephen's College. I'm pretty sure that the past 3 days have been momentous and highly insightful to all of us. First and foremost, I extend my gratitude to our esteemed judges, Dr. Rekha Gupta, Dr. Akshay Rana, Ms. Kanpriya Pandey, and Mr. Harsh Bindal for accepting a humble invite and giving us their precious time to make this event a cognizant one. We're indebted to our HOD, Dr. Jacob Cherian, for his inaugural words on the legacy of the paper presentation competition and its significance. I'm also extremely thankful to all the participants for their interest in the event and for their perceptive and imaginative presentations, which have indeed elevated the event intellectually. I'm extremely grateful to the members of the Executive Council of the Physics Society and the Meera Memorial Organizing Committee for their dedication and diligence, which are the keys for making this event a successful one. I'm also grateful to our staff advisor, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, for his guidance and support at each and every step of the event. Finally, I extend my gratitude to our principal, Professor John Verghese, for his support in providing us a space where we can hold events like this. Finally, I'm extremely grateful to all the people who have taken time out of their busy schedules to attend the event over the course of past 3 days. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalika. So now I request everyone to turn on their cameras. We will just take a quick screenshot, or that's a group photograph of everyone today present. So please, everyone, switch on your cameras.
Thank you, everyone. Done?
Thank you, everyone. Now you can leave the meeting if you want, or you can stay back. But we will close the meeting.